So what we're going to talk about today is how the sales team at Cexum, a team of 3, is scaling towards an end-of-year goal of $3 million, and how we're defying pipeline and revenue-generating expectations. And we'll talk about all of the tools that we use and the tactics that we apply with surgical precision in order to make our goal. And so our story starts with our philosophy towards hiring. It was a top-line requirement that everyone has experience selling technical tools to a technical audience, and specifically some experience selling QA tools. And there's this idea that salespeople overpromise and underdeliver, and it clashes a lot with engineering mentality. And I have a story about this. So I'm in a book club, and my friend brought his brother, and his brother is an engineer. He's launching this really big privileged access management evaluation tool. I've done PAM sales in the past. So I tell him, hey, when you've made your vendor selection and you're negotiating, let me know. I can help you get a really good deal. And he goes, oh, are you an engineer too? And I go, no, I'm in sales. And he goes, oh, you're the enemy. And so it takes a really specific type of mentality to sell technical sales tools, and it's like half learned and half innate. And all this is to say is that our sales team has over 20 years of experience selling technical tools, and we've closed deals with companies like Confluent, Pathword, and Netscope. And for intros, which I skipped the slide, sorry about that. My name's Abigail. I'm the go-to-market lead of Cexum.
Yeah, so I'm Britney. I don't know if you saw my intro earlier, but I'll be giving an hour-long speech on paleontology. No, next summit, next year. So I have been selling into engineering and technical roles for 8 years now. And that ranges everything from selling against companies like Oracle and SAP and all the way to DevOps and AWS software and such. And now here I am at QA.
I'm Joe Mendoza. I'm also on the go-to-market team here at Cexum. I have close to 12 to 13 years of sales experience, and I've sold pretty much everything under the sun. So started my career as an alcohol sales rep, moved into technology, sold marketing software, predictive analytics, cybersecurity, and software quality assurance. So I'll be giving a bit of a talk about how discovery plays into all of these different types of sales and just general frameworks for effective discovery and tying your value prop to like what the conversations actually are about and how that matters to the customers.
So at Cexum, we have a highly structured sales process. We have a sales-led growth model. We have very, very high standards about what counts as top of funnel. And our primary focus on is qualifying in or qualifying out quickly. We gate our technical evaluation process behind the signing of an annual SaaS-based contract that has a 30-day opt-out window. And this does one really important thing. It eliminates the noise from the sales pipeline, and it makes us focus on actual customers and actual prospective customers rather than busy work that sucks up a ton of time as well as burns out the rest of the team. So like our customer engineering team downstream of us shouldn't have to suffer the repercussions of us signing a bad deal. There's a saying in sales called hope is not a strategy. And this means that if a meeting isn't on the calendar, if the contract isn't signed, then it isn't actionable. And so we focus really heavily on metrics and things that really move the needle for the business. And we align on frameworks, process, and collaboration. And this makes us really effective. And we focus on measurable activities. So there are no vibe sellers at Cexum.
Have you guys heard of that? Okay, next time.
It's a whole thing. So who wants to take a guess as to when I was hired? Yeah, there you go. 2 days before Halloween, actually. So our overall sales motion relies on qualifying in and out really quickly. And we really focus on on selling with velocity. And we fully bake the next steps into each sales call. So then that way our buyers know exactly what the process is. They show up to a call knowing what to expect. They bring the right people. And this has resulted in our average sales cycle for our 30-ish K platform being roughly 40 days. And we've gotten a signed contract, all of us have gotten a signed contract across the line within 2 months of starting at Cexum. So currently we are 8% ahead of plan. And our ACV has grown from 27K to 37K in less than 6 months. And our largest contract is 302K, which just shows that the future is really bright at Cexum, and we have a large enterprise appeal.
Right. So throughout my career and all of selling the different things, I've seen a trend that 40 to 60% of business-to-business ops typically don't go to a competitor. They go to no decision or status quo. The reason for this is that prospects are deciding, sure, we have pain here, but this pain is either not costly enough or not acute enough for us to decide that we need to make a change, and the cost of change hurts significantly more. So the way that we identify this pain is I kind of use the X-ray analogy. We're looking for 5 bones on this scan. The first one is a problem. So we want to understand the visible break on the X-ray, like what happened, right? Very surface level. Then we want to dig deeper and find the root cause. So this is what caused the fracture in the first place. Like what is the reason for the pain? And then we want to quantify this. So we look at what we call the current state. So we ask a lot of very targeted questions. What's going on? Who's it affecting? How much is it costing? How much time is being spent? And then by doing this, we can start to understand the impact of inaction. So if they don't make a change, what happens 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line? They're obviously looking for something to change, but why? And then we want them to start thinking of this dream state, this future state, this ideal scenario, the world in which they've solved the problem and now, everything's great, sunshine, rainbows, like the whole company's clicking their heels together. So we repeat this pain back to them, and when the prospects hear their pain from a third party, 2 things happen. The pain of today feels much more expensive than change, and then the pull of tomorrow feels significantly more magnetic. So without this clarity, we miss the mark. We and engineering start building a solution and start bringing them towards this path, but that bridge doesn't bring them where they need to go. So these are harmful misses. I'll make an analogy here. So let's say you walk into a pharmacy, clutching your side, and the pharmacist says, take these 2 pills and call me tomorrow. Obviously, this is reckless. We don't know if they're allergic to the pills. We don't know if the pills are actually going to solve their problem. But we as salespeople, we get paid if we push the pills on them. Now, a lot of business-to-business sales reps are doing this. This is what we call kind of like order taking. But without deep discovery, we don't know if these pills are actually going to help. So as sellers, we must be doctors instead of pharmacists. So doctors do 3 things. We ask pointed questions to map the problem. We order X-rays to confirm hypothesis. And then we explain this in plain language to the prospect. Then the prescription is written. So let's be clear. We're not here to hand out pills blindly. We need to trust and treat the root problem or cause. We don't solve the problem. We simply treat it temporarily if we just prescribe pills without doing discovery. So hence we need to dig deeper into the surface level pain, hence the X-ray. So we want to quantify this pain, and then this is where the deal starts to become real. We want to say, is the pain dull or sharp? Is it consistent or intermittent? This needs to be a big and meaningful problem that they're solving. Otherwise, the deal fizzles and dies because it's a nice to have. And we want to know if it's a need to have. And this is what, going back to Abigail said about, very diligent discovery and understanding that we need to figure out what to prioritize as a small company. So we have to do 4 things with the prospect. 1, admit there is a problem. We have to get them to admit it. 2, they have to have an appetite to solve that problem. 3, they have to believe that we can solve that problem for them. And 4, they have to commit to going on a journey with us to solve that problem. So this brings us to the bridge. We have to start by building a map. We quantify the pain and waste in terms of dollars, hours, risk. We ask simple but very ruthless questions. What's going on? Tell us more. Tell us more. Why? Why is this happening? What have you tried to solve it? Why hasn't it been solved yet? Who else have you talked to? Then we add the destination. So we turn this hype into North Star metrics. We want to say, okay, if we've affected this particular KPI of yours, what does that do? Does that make a huge splash in your business? Do your customers start giggling with glee because you've actually served them in a much more significant way? If the current state is the cliff, the future state is the opposite shore. Now, armed with the start and finish, we can define the gap. So this is success criteria. What do we have to do to cross the bridge? What do we have to do to build the bridge? Like, what does the bridge look like? It's a suspension bridge, a cantilever bridge. So we then take a proof plan. We work on this with engineering. So for us at Cexum, this is a 30-day blueprint. We get buy-in on the KPIs that we're affecting, and then we set deliverables. And all of this is articulated very clearly to the customer and created with them, so they get buy-in. The larger the gap, the harder this bridge is the harder the gap is to cross. So the cost of inaction is higher, the future state is more unattainable, and now we map every criterion back to the discovery of the X-ray, and then every task to the North Star. So engineering this bridge needs to happen before we pour concrete. And then the last piece here is Showtime. Engineering demos against the predefined success criteria. The KPIs inch towards the North Star metrics. Our weekly syncs ask one main question. Are we headed in the right direction, and are we going towards where that future state looks like? If not, we need to pivot. Now that we've mapped the bridge, we have the bones, we've measured the spans, agreed on load limits, we have to remind ourselves why we were doing this and always go back to that why. Because, again, if this is just a nice to have, we're building a bridge and the prospect is never going to walk over it. We need to operationalize this, and the way that we do that is codifying that blueprint. Again, North Star metrics, define success criteria, everything in shared documents. So the bridge is load tested as being built, and we work on this with the customer. They need to feel confident in every step of the way across that bridge, so by the time the whole thing is built and they cross over to the future state, we're all on the same page. So the last piece is, how do we operationalize this as a company? We want to start with the reality and end with the vision. We name the gap, we own the bridge. And then we iterate weekly with a feedback loop. We inspect, to adapt, and repeat. And when the team, everybody on it, from engineering to sales to marketing, everybody's in lockstep. This frames the work in such a way that all of the people are speaking the same language. And this way, execution feels natural, and we turn this impossible gap into a tangible reality.
So we've learned about the process we're using, why the process is important, and now we're going to come to more of the softer terms, kind of talking about how we're thinking about this process and applying it. So I was actually really excited to see this theme of listening and pattern matching throughout all the sessions today, because it means I've been here for almost 5 months now. My brain's already becoming part of the hive. So I was excited to see that this matches the overall theme. And I think we've seen a lot of different definitions of what listening and pattern matching is. So for the theme of how I'm talking about it, because I think when we hear someone in sales thinking about it, kind of like Dr. Flex said, we think of it more in a way of listening so I can think about what I'm going to say back to you. But in this context, we're thinking of it more of growing and scaling as a lean team. So think about it more from like a higher account view of how we're recognizing signals and making sure we're documenting these signals as we're talking to people in the trenches, as Tom mentioned, going through the jungle wearing the safari hat, making sure we're noticing these things and applying it to the system as a whole. So, for example, it's more about understanding where is best, our time is best spent. So that's how we're looking at pattern matching today. So we've worked so far in building a very clear picture of our ICP, as Abigail has mentioned. Of course, that's always changing, but as of now, we have a clear picture of what's a green light and what's a red light. So green light, we're making sure when we're on a call, we hear these signals, we know where this movie is going. Okay, they're AI, looking to test AI, they're moving really quickly. I know this story, this is gonna be a good place for me to spend my time. Now, there's also, of course, the red lights. They're not willing, they haven't spent any money in automation, they're outsourcing for $10K a year, and that's perfect for them. Probably not where I wanna spend my time, and that's okay. Do not be looking to push the wrong box into the wrong shape hole or anything like that, because we don't wanna waste cycles there. As Abigail mentioned, like quick disqualification is really important because it's not just a waste of my time, I'm not gonna just miss my number if I focus on these, but it's really, really expensive. It's expensive to be wasting time in the wrong areas. It takes a lot of time up and resources from the team and the company as a whole. And it will save us months of chasing the wrong thing if we can really make sure we're focusing and listening to these signals as a whole and adding them to the network. So that discipline, I think we're really looking at to making sure we're documenting this and speaking about this and recognize these signals early is why, even though we're 3, we can provide the output of more like 6 or 9 and focusing on creating that exponential effect. Okay. So we are making sure we're chasing what counts. Sorry, I walk around a lot. I'm not going to stand still. Okay. So once we're understanding these signals, how do we go from here, and why is it important that we're sharing this tribal knowledge, not, of course, just within Cexum, but across the superset communities and companies in general? So I think why it's important, I had a history teacher. He wasn't my favorite, but I remember this quote to this day. Those who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So I think when we're here sharing this knowledge, we're making sure that if I make a mistake, that the AEs after me as we scale and grow do not have to make the same ones I did. So we're here to pave that path. So we're operating as a system here, and we really make sure that as we learn one thing, that this is spreading amongst the 3 of us, and then to engineering behind us, and of course to the entire system. So I will say, of course, I recognize it's pretty easy at this point. You know, if you've seen our desks, they're literally like this close apart in the office, and engineering is right behind us. But we are making sure we're involving them more into every single deal we're working, and that exponential factor compounds further and doubles that reach. So our multiplier is how fast we're moving and how fast that knowledge is being spread. So on the theme of medicine, of the surgical accuracy and x-rays, kind of think of it as how I don't want to be morbid, but how cold spreads through the office. One person has it, the next day, by the end of the week, it's propagated to so many more people. So that's how we're sort of thinking about sharing that knowledge, is when you're learning experience something Monday, the entire team is sharper by Friday, because we're incorporating that to everyone. So I added, I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of the R0 value. It's okay. If it's too nerdy. This is the mathematical equation for how fast something like a virus can propagate, and it's more powerful the higher its R0 value is. So that's how we're thinking of knowledge spreading here. So a couple examples of this, actually, and even with large companies now, when they were scaling, is Toyota used the same principle. So they actually had, this was on their assembly lines as they were manufacturing products. And on an assembly line, they had this cord that they would pull when an issue or something was found on a piece of, car parts. I don't know anything about cars. And so they would flag the issue, and that became something everyone had to notice and fix. It became everyone's problem on that assembly line. So from that, they were actually able to, after time, faster production, fewer defects on everything they were working on, because they never had to repeat the same mistake twice. And I think this is the same as if we heard of Amazon's correction of errors, code of errors document. They do the same as well, where it's shared across the team, so one failure amongst one team prevents failures amongst many others. So pulling this back to kind of how we use this at Cexum, for example, and an example of a deal I was working on and that we're working on currently is a POV we're running with a client that's close to converting and hopefully converting very soon. So a POV for us is our proof of value period. This is really our time to put exactly the proof to the pudding and show exactly what we're able to do before they have any commitment to stay with us. So this period is really, really, really important for us to differentiate against others. And early on, we recognized that this particular deal was highly competitive, and the competitor had a lot of technical credibility on their side. So instead of treating this as a pure sales motion, we worked and turned inward to pull in our customer engineering team. So shout out to Evan. Hey. So we were operating now as one system together. So making sure we're understanding the pains and values from both sides and shared what we're hearing both from both sides of the business and the technical conversation. So this is shift the dynamic, what I think can be sometimes feels like sales pitching just from our side. Bringing in the trust and credibility from our engineering side really brought in a different dynamic for what the client was sharing with us. So it was more of a unified front, and it's bringing in a lot more trust in the deal from every perspective there now we're seeing. So it gave us now a reusable proof point to be able to use this as an example in the future and be able to come in a lot more powerfully against the same competitor or in a similar deal. So wrapping this all up, so as you can see, it's more about making sure we're following these signals, not quite the head count of how many people on the team, but how effectively we're working. So as we've learned today, the edge isn't talking more, it's being able to listen and recognize these different patterns in everyone we're speaking to and use them to decide where we're spending our time. And it makes 3 people feel a lot bigger based on how we're sharing and how we're learning and propagating this information. So the main point for everyone, you don't need a 10-person team to grow and sell like one. What you need is discipline in that listening, that learning, and whether you're in sales, engineering, this is how you can be able to work together as a system to be able to sell like 10 or 15. And that is mine.
Thank you. Questions?
Great. Great presentation. Congratulations on the success. Great job. And thanks for sharing the insights. I don't know enough about your business, but with the bridge analogy, are you finding that you're building the same types of bridges, or is it bespoke every time you interact?
So I would say at Cexum, the bridge is similar. Again, the gap is going to be different, right? So every person you talk to, there's varying degrees of maturity in the software development lifecycle at each company, right? Do you have strictly manual quality assurance, or do you have a team of automation engineers who are working on this project every day? The pain that they feel is similar. The cause of it's different. So it's on us to understand why they are looking first, a very high level, what brings you to the table today? And then the next piece is, okay, we're building a bridge. The future state looks pretty similar to the same thing, but maybe there's some big rocks in the middle that we're going to have an additional pylon for, right? We don't really know what that's going to look like, and we can't assume that, because if we do, then that puts us in a position where we've deviated from the specs that the prospect is actually going to need. So to answer your question shortly, it's not the same, but it's similar.
Thank you.
This team is so impressive. I appreciate you sharing some of these secrets. When we talked about velocity this morning, yes, it's velocity of results, but it's also the velocity of knowledge sharing and collective learning, as you're calling out, is the precondition for all the revenue success Cexum is achieving. I was wondering if you could share, Britney, you said your desks are just right there, all next to each other, and then the engineers and others are sitting right there in that huddle. For teams that don't have the benefit of just sitting right next to each other, what kinds of tools and tricks would you recommend for propagating knowledge and staying in sync? And also, if you wanted to speculate, how much of a difference has that made for Cexum? Just physical or physical proximity, how much does that matter?
So I'll answer actually the second question first. So Abigail and I actually worked at a smaller, mid-sized startup together very early in our careers, and we were all in office, but I would say it does make a difference because those engineers, even though it's like a larger office, they were on the opposite siloed area of the floor, and we never got to speak to them. I never got to hear what they were saying on calls. They never got to hear what we were saying on calls, and it did create sort of, even just the physical distance, I think, created this sort of emotional, you are two different teams, and that kind of perspective. Don't go bother them with what they're working on. So I do think that physical distance can create that mentality a little bit. Now, to the first question, I have been remote most of my career, like especially during and after COVID, and I've worked in sales and that. And I would say, really, in order the tips and tricks of kind of involving yourself in those other areas, just the old-fashioned going around and asking, really. I would make sure not only, like, you prep to know who your client is on every call and who they are and what the role is, and do the same internally when you're working with your own colleagues. What is your role? I remember I had a mentor who would, every single internal colleague she worked with, she would ask, how are you paid? What are your KPIs? Like, what's important to you? How are you driving this business forward? And because it helped her understand how best to work with someone to make sure they were accomplishing their own goals. Compensation drives that behavior. So I think just understanding the role and the goals of each and every person you're working with can kind of help you, okay, where does my part play into this, and how do I best serve you and work with you?
I'm next. Amazing, you guys. Incredible. Thank you for sharing your success. If you wouldn't mind, so I'm founder-led sales solo here with a little bit of support from one of our team members, and so I'm running the whole motion. Could you share how each of you support the motion, and are you all running the motion like full send?
What do you mean by motion? From like qualification to closed one, or like?
Yeah, totally. Or from the start, outbounding, identify. Are you all doing taking different parts of the GTM?
So we're all sales account executives. So from qualification, inbound meeting to closed one, and then account management after that, because technical sales are kind of unique in that you can really expand 5, 10x a business after you, or an account after you close. So we're all doing that motion together.
Follow up. How are you doing your lead identification, and is that like a shared process? And then if you all are running the motion full send, are you like working together on sharing? Obviously, you're working together on sharing your processes, but do they deviate at all between each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes. I don't believe in fostering a culture of drag and drop AEs. I've worked at places like that. It's real boring. Overall, throughout Cexum, there's a really big focus on experimentation. So we do very, I don't know, not elaborate, but kind of elaborate iteration and execution cycles. So we all have our special slides that we like to use, but we do have some standard ones that are kind of a requirement for moving a prospect through the pipeline.
Question here as well. So going back to the bridge analogy, the last two kind of segments of that bridge were the proof of value phase and then like the metrics measurement phase. So in the proof of value phase, that's like, putting your money where your mouth is. And I imagine there have been times when you kind of already know at the completion of that proof of value whether a customer is going to proceed or not, maybe because like you can kind of see their usage and see like, okay, they're really using it, and okay, we'll get to the next step, or this customer, like they're not really using it. I imagine when you see like that next step of like, hey, it's looking optimistic, they're using the product, we can kind of see the metrics and see that it's, it's doing what we set out to do. Have there been times when you're really optimistic about that and then they come in and say, oh, no, we're not moving forward, and that's like a punch to the gut? And if so, after that, if we lose a customer, what do you do with the relationship afterwards? Is it like dead, you move on, or do you still kind of keep in touch for checking in 6 months later, and is there value in that?
It's a great question, and it kind of warrants the classic sales response. It depends, but I would say, to your point, like, we'll go through the first example, right? We've built the bridge. We're getting to the end. We've kind of like jumped on it a few times and said, okay, this seems sturdy enough. The prospect walks on it, and now they're trying to drive a tank across. We didn't build it strong enough. The bridge starts to crumble and collapse. I think that, this has happened to me, right? Like, I'm kind of newer at the company, and I've had a couple proof of values that didn't go the way that we wanted to. There's a kind of a combination of, like, did I ask the right questions? Did I actually get the specs for the bridge right? Did I dig deeper when they gave me kind of a non-committal, unclear answer? Like, maybe I missed that we needed some extra support in certain areas. So, in that case, yes, there's probably a door open for us in the future, right? Because maybe they just didn't see what they needed from the product at the time. And, if we launch a couple new features that are much more aligned with what they were looking for, then sure. But in other cases, we've had some problems from a technical perspective that, like, we couldn't be, like, we were like, oh, they have a VPN. It's not a problem. Like, we've got around it many times with other customers. But it became an absolutely critical barrier, and we couldn't cross it in one scenario. I don't know if that's a winnable deal, even if we came back to them 6 months down the line. So it's going to be pretty dependent on, like, what happened to that piece. And, I think learning from these things, we can go back and say, oh, you know what? My ears perked up because I remember this one, because they obviously hurt, right? They're not fun to have that happen, but we can kind of build to adjust and make sure that same problem, to Brittany's point, doesn't happen to us or the next people who get hired or anyone else on the team.
I was going to add one more point there, and an important sentiment to what you're saying is that we call it the proof of value, not the building of value. So we go into it making sure we can already prove it out that that's built, and it's not a time to try it. Exactly.
So, couple questions for you. One, as an old seller and now an enablement leader, it warms my heart to hear you talking about tribal knowledge and being shared, first and foremost. And I agree that it absolutely multiplies. My question would be twofold. One is, how are you documenting your best practices, your wins, whether it be POV or closes, as well as your losses for the people that come behind you? Because either the team continues to grow or, God forbid, one of you decides to leave. What do you have in place to kind of accelerate that ramp and that lead to revenue for the people that come behind you?
So we have a number of resources. I think that there are two that are the most impactful. And one is after action reports. So sometimes for an important win or an important loss, or maybe just one that just was kind of a head scratcher, we do an after action report for it. And we go through with really rigorous detail and with a focus on the unvarnished look of the truth, like, oh, it was a bad lead, this one's on marketing, or like, oh, it was the customer, they got weird. Like, really unvarnished, like what happened, what went wrong or right. And we document it and we put it in a folder. So we do one a month. And when Joe and Britney started, one of the first exercises in week 2 was pick a call and do an after action report for it. And obviously they weren't super up to date on everything about the product or the process, but that was really instrumental in training, as well as instrumental for me, because Britney and Joe both uncovered things that Gal and I had been talking about, and we hadn't identified yet because those were old calls. Another resource that we have that's really important is our use case deck, and it outlines good and bad use cases that are within our ICP. And so when we get a call, and for an example, I won't get in the weeds on this, but there's one that's manual to AI testing. They skip the step of automation, and those have a really high rate of failure. And so we're all aware that could be, even if it sounds like it's really good, we need to do some second layer questions to make sure that they're willing to make that leap.
Great. One other question for you. So whether it be one of those big wins that you have or one of those complex, maybe even hairy kind of situations you went through. What if I am an AA that comes on and reading is not the way that I imbibe or the way that I learn? Have you thought about maybe taking a couple of those big wins or those difficult, complex situations, or even a couple of losses, and maybe done a quick video reels or recording so that you have that as well on top of the documentation? Since everyone
No.
learns differently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could, although all of our calls are documented. We recorded every call since the inception of the company. So it might just be instrumental just to watch the whole discovery call. If that's too much of a time suck, you could take it up to 2x speed, you know? Yeah. It's something to consider.
We do use Fathom, and it has a lot of built-in capabilities to be able to get summaries, key points. You can ask it questions, and that is very helpful when I started as well. One more.
Yeah, this is the bridge analogy again. And I saw your slide on the growth, right? So every month you were closing more and more deals. So, and you also said that, to Erwin's questions, that the bridges were similar, but not exactly the same. So you did have requirements or things that had to be built out. So, but you did rapidly close all the deals. So what was it, like how did your product engineering team scale, or how did you manage that? Because you guys moved really fast, but enterprise deals are mostly very bespoke at times, right? So how did you, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so none of us are the founder. That would be a question for Gal and probably for Evan. He's the first US engineer in the company. So he would probably have better insight into that. We just talk a lot and then ask for money, you know? So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of collaboration. Honestly, like Cexum is going to undergo a lot of change within the product to meet the enterprise demand, because we have lost some enterprise deals because their requirements are different than SMB and mid-market. So it's a work in progress. We're a 2-year-old company. Stay tuned.
Run away.
Well, it's hard to say because we move so fast. I just feel like we're a different beast than when we started. So I don't know. I'd have to think about the question more in depth. But it's definitely been a fast ride. And like Abigail said, it's definitely Gaul might have more insight because he's the co-founder and he's actually on a lot of these POV calls, and I do join them from time to time and I help with the onboarding process and I'm getting more involved with that. But if we're talking like from inception and how did we grow, it's kind of blurry in my eyes because we were all over the place.
So I was there at the beginning too. It was in the next room during the agent conversation on the technical track, which Gal led, where it's noted that you should not try to build an agent or, frankly, any piece of software unless you've done it manually yourself. So the big breakthrough here, Manaswini, was we actually weren't slinging code. We were very deliberate about what we call the Wizard of Oz approach. Here's a customer behind the screen. Evan, Gal, we're going to kick some hamsters. We're just going to do it manually. Nothing sexy. Appallingly manual. And but by doing that, we were able to learn exactly what the outlines of the software needed to look like. And we're still doing that every single day. We have forward deployed engineers, Evan, Matt, there's a whole team who are close to the customers, generating playwright code, writing tests, and we're interweaving the software solution as we go. But it's a shameless approach to just actually, and we call it AI outcomes as a service. So you don't, how do we do it? You don't care. You want tests, and we deliver the tests. I know we're wrapping up here, but I'm so proud of this team, and I just want to underscore a couple of quick notes here. When Abigail, because we have people in the room who are building new teams from scratch, when trigger and pay attention to when Abigail says, I've been part of drag and drop sales orgs, boring. You have to find sales reps who have the disposition to learn and experiment and try new stuff, which this team brings in spades. They don't, and we've hired, a lot of us collectively have hired sales reps who are like, give me the pitch, where's the lead, who do I call? And they just want to recite a script, right? You have to, it's a dispositional thing, and I think we were very lucky to hire Abigail first, and then, speaking of Arnott, and then she brings on Britney and Joe, and they start to, just naturally, the tribe emerges, the vibe is assembled, and you're not having to unwork or redo any bad habits. Because from the very get, with Abigail, Evan, employee number 1, entrepreneurs just doing it, solving it every day. If we like to talk about processes, but it turns out the selection decisions at design time have the biggest impact. So kudos to this team. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right.